By the time Aira reached her third day at the school, she had already memorized the rhythm of the hallway, the sharp clang of lockers, the bursts of laughter, the overlapping voices that never seemed to settle into silence. It was too much. Every sound felt amplified, like it was directed straight at her, even when it wasn't. She kept her eyes down as she walked, fingers curled tightly around the strap of her backpack. Her knuckles had turned pale from the pressure, but she didn't loosen her grip. It gave her something to hold on to, something steady in a place that felt anything but. At first, the attention had been subtle. A glance here. A whisper there. Is she new? She looks scared. Why is she walking like that? Aira had tried to ignore it. She told herself it would pass. New students always got noticed. People would get bored eventually. But they didn't. By Tuesday, the whispers had started to follow her. She could feel them trailing behind her like shadows that refused to disappear. In class, she chose the seat near the window, hoping the outside light would make her feel less trapped. The sunlight spilled across her desk, warm and soft, but it didn't quiet the unease inside her chest. Her leg bounced slightly under the desk, an unconscious attempt to release the tension building inside her. That was when Samir noticed her. He leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms as if he owned the entire room. "Why does she look like she's about to run away?" he said, loud enough for half the class to hear. A few students snickered. Aira froze. She kept her eyes on her notebook, pretending to read something that didn't exist. Her heart started pounding faster, the sound filling her ears until it drowned out everything else. "Hey," Samir continued, nudging the boy next to him, "watch this." He suddenly dropped his pen onto the floor with a sharp clatter. The sound cracked through the room. Aira flinched instantly. It wasn't dramatic. It was small, just a quick jerk of her shoulders, a sharp inhale, but it was enough. Samir grinned. "See? Told you." The laughter came quicker this time. Aira swallowed hard and tried to steady her breathing. In through her nose. Out through her mouth. Slow. Controlled. She had practiced this before. She knew what to do. But knowing didn't make it easier. The teacher walked in moments later, and the class settled down, but the damage had already been done. Aira could still feel their eyes on her, like she had been marked. The next day, it got worse. Samir wasn't just reacting anymore, he was planning. During group work, he made sure to sit close enough to her to whisper just loud enough for others to hear. "Careful, guys," he said, smirking, "don't talk too loud. We might scare her again." A few students laughed under their breath. Aira kept her gaze fixed on the paper in front of her, even though the words blurred together. Her fingers tightened around her pen until it felt like it might snap. "Do you even talk?" Samir added, tilting his head as if studying her. "Or are you just, like this all the time?" She didn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't. Her throat felt tight, like the words were stuck somewhere deep inside and refused to come out. Samir leaned back again, clearly satisfied. "Guess that's a no." By Wednesday, the classroom wasn't the only place she felt it. In the hallway, Samir would walk past her and deliberately bump his shoulder into hers, not hard enough to get in trouble, but enough to throw her off balance. "Oops," he would say, not sounding sorry at all. Once, he clapped his hands loudly right behind her. Aira gasped before she could stop herself, her entire body jolting forward. That one got the biggest reaction. "Yo, that was priceless." Samir laughed, high-fiving one of his friends. A small group had started to form around him now, people who didn't necessarily hate Aira, but enjoyed the entertainment. It was easier to laugh along than to stand out. Aira noticed that. She noticed everything. The way people looked at each other before laughing. The hesitation in some of their eyes. The silence of those who didn't join in but didn't step in either. She noticed who avoided her gaze and who held it just a second too long. But she still said nothing. At lunch, she sat alone near the edge of the cafeteria, picking at her food more than eating it. The noise there was even worse, trays clattering, chairs scraping, voices overlapping into a chaotic hum. She tried to focus on something small. The pattern on the table. The way the light reflected off her water bottle. Anything to keep her grounded. Then came the sound of a tray dropping somewhere behind her. It wasn't even close. But it was loud enough. Her shoulders jerked again. A few people nearby noticed. One girl whispered something to her friend, and they both glanced at Aira before quickly looking away. Aira exhaled slowly, pressing her hands flat against the table to steady herself. She hated this. Not just the teasing, but the feeling of being watched. Measured. Reduced to reactions she couldn't fully control. By Thursday, Samir had turned it into a routine. A noise. A comment. A laugh. Repeat. And every time, Aira reacted, just enough to keep it going. But beneath the fear, beneath the tightness in her chest and the constant urge to disappear, something else was quietly building. It wasn't obvious. It didn't show in her expression or her posture. But it was there. Because after school, when the hallways emptied and the noise finally faded, Aira didn't rush home like everyone else. She walked, slowly, deliberately, to the old sports hall at the back of the campus. It was quieter there. The air felt different. Still. She would stand just inside the doorway at first, listening to the silence, letting her breathing even out. Then she would step in. Her eyes would scan the room, not nervously, but carefully. Observing the space. The mats. The distances. Sometimes, a few students practiced there, wrestling, training, moving with a kind of controlled precision she found, grounding. She didn't join them. She didn't speak. She just watched. Every movement. Every shift of weight. Every moment where balance was lost, and taken back. By the end of the week, Aira still flinched at loud noises. She still kept her head down. She still said nothing when Samir laughed. But if anyone had been paying close enough attention, really paying attention, they might have noticed something subtle changing. The way her stance had become just a little more stable. The way her grip on her backpack wasn't just tight anymore, but controlled. The way her eyes, though still quiet, were no longer just afraid. They were learning.